We gather here today on the 2nd and the 12th of November 2022, the Saturday of the National Weekend of Remembrance. We gather here today to remember the men named on the plaques here in Highams Library, the plaques which are just in the entrance as you walk in. We also remember those who have died in past conflicts. For the last few years, the nation has marked a number of significant centenaries. 2014, we marked 100 years since the start of the First World War. In 2016, we marked 100 years since the beginning of the Battle of the Somme. 2018, we marked the end of 100 years since the end of the First World War. And then 100 years since the unveiling of the cenotaph, and following on from that last year, 100 years of the Poppy Appeal. That particular cycle of commemorations is now over. This year, the committee of the Highams Park Society felt that during our local act of remembrance, we should focus on the men who are named here, ordinary men caught up in extraordinary circumstances.
Although he was born in Walthamstow, Edward Bridges lived for most of his life in 61 Winchester Road. He served in France from 1916 to 18 in the 2nd Battalion Essex Regiment and as part of the Trench Mortar Battery. In the late 1970s, he felt ready to record in writing his memories of the time spent in the trenches. He entitled the volume The Armed Civilian. Edward Bridges was my grandfather. Here are some excerpts describing his feelings shortly after being called up. The night was still, deathly still. The sky steely bright with a million stars twinkling and glistening, as if mocking those foolish humans below, now crouching close to the earth, oblivious of the beauty in the heavens. The moon was timidly showing its face over the skyline, fearful lest its light should serve to reveal the twisted shapes of men who had lost the race, now trying to find the comfort that had been denied them in life. Black and stark in the half-light, the buckled iron stakes stood like sentinels, all joined in massed confusion by spiked, snake-like threads, bearing still the evidence of blood-stained clothing torn from the bodies of staggering men, some of whom had not regained the comparative safety of the trench before becoming ensnared in this forest of blood and iron. Later they would be freed and laid to rest, never to grow old. Such was the scene that met my tired eyes as I surveyed the field of my baptism. How hopefully and almost joyfully a few hours before had we new recruits mounted this same parapet to rid the earth of the despicable Hun for the glory of God and the salvation of our homeland. The old sweats had received such childlike enthusiasm with a cynical smile and caustic wit. You'll find out in double quick time that Jerry ain't using balloons. We had indeed discovered the truth the hard way, and proof of that now lay stiff and still out there. Lads like me who had left home just 3 months ago. As I stood and mused over those rapidly moving events and listened to the constant shuffle of stretcher bearers taking back the more fortunate of the wounded, I began to realise how really ill-equipped we were to fight a battle of any description. Gone now were the illusions of the glorious charge, for we had been weaned on the heroic history book battles of Balaclava and Inkerman, on With the Flag to Pretoria, and the total invincibility of the British soldiers who fought foursquare and always overcame the enemy. How inadequate we were, not soldiers, but rather armed civilians, protecting our homeland, young boys thrown into battle before we had had time to say goodbyes to our families. I had only fired my rifle on the range a couple of times before and learned to merely stick a bayonet into a bag of straw. Straight in and twist and pull rapidly, the sergeant had said. No mention had been made of how to deal with machine gun bullets that could rip the body to pieces from a distance of 100 yards. How had I managed to get myself into this situation? I cast my mind back to the first taste of this unnatural existence, although I confess that my brain hardly functioned properly from the day I received my calling up papers, the official document ordering me to report for duty at Worley Barracks, Brentwood. I'd never left home before, and now I was off to be a soldier. Goodbye, Mother. I'll soon be back. Then came the gradual hardening process, the barrack huts, the hard beds, the marching, drilling, firing, learning how to kill, the troopships, the bundling into base camps, all of us just so many numbers. Essex Regiment, be ready to leave tomorrow morning, the sergeant shouted. You're off to the front. The cattle trucks would take us to nowhere. Eventually we had arrived at an open field just as dusk was falling. The boom of guns was all around us now, and lights were burning in the distance. You, and you, fall in. Pick up a spade apiece and follow me. We go over the trench here. When the lights go up, freeze just where you are. When we line up and halt, get digging. Over we went. Up went the lights. I fell to the ground as the machine guns spluttered. As soon as the lights were extinguished, I rose and shook a prone figure in front of me. Come on, mate. He didn't move. His body so bloated and cold to the touch that I realised with a shock that he was indeed dead and had been so for days. This, then, I had mused, is war.
For many years we have referred to the men named on these plaques. We've referred to them as the Halex plaques. They are more correctly called the Memorial to the Xylonite workers. In 1897, the British Xylonite Company moved from Homerton to a new site here in what we now call Highams Park. Xylonite was an early form of celluloid and was highly flammable. The new site here was literally in the Essex countryside, so much more suitable for a potentially dangerous manufacturing process. The Xylonite works dominated this small local community. Thousands of men and women worked there. There was a large chimney, a factory hooter, a loud factory hooter in fact, a social club, many social clubs, the Rolls Sports Ground. The Xylonite works even had its own fire brigade. Men and women came to work at the Xylonite works from Hayland, but more importantly from many outlying areas. In 1914, when these men went to war, Highams Park had its station, its underpass. There were terraced houses on Selwyn Avenue, Winchester Road, Beechhall Road, Hayland Road, Beverley Road, the large houses running up to Highams Park Lake. There were 3 churches. There were 2 pubs, the County Arms and the Royal Oak, cinema and shops. It was a small community in southwest Essex, semi-urban and semi-rural, something we can recognise in some ways today. The Xylonite men, as I've said, also came from outlying areas. The names on these plaques reflect men from South Chingford, Wood Street, Chapel End, South Tottenham and Leighton. In 1914, Germany had been rearming for a number of years. The Kaiser definitely had his eye on Belgium's North Sea ports. Germany invaded Belgium on the 4th of August 1914. Because of the 1838 London Treaty, Britain had to protect Belgium, and war was declared on Germany. As you are all aware, in 1914 there was a great swell of patriotic fervour. There were thousands of men, maybe 2,000 men and women who worked at the Xylonite works, but out of that number, 425, I'll say that again, 425 men volunteered to fight. 40 men did not return, roughly 1 in 10. And we honour these men today. In some parts of the country, men from factories formed Pals Battalions. That wasn't the case with the Xylonite works. The factory wasn't situated in a small town, and in fact the men came from many different local communities. I'd like to mention 2 of the names on the plaques today. One of the men mentioned on the plaques is Walter Goodman. He was born in Dalston in 1895. He was one of 9 children. In 1911 he moved to Hayland, Walthamstow really, a road just off Fulbourn Road, Victoria Road. He worked at the Xylonite works as a postboy, a postman. His sisters, Elsie and Dorothy, also worked at the Xylonite. He was married in 1914 and he had 1 son. He served with the Duke of Cambridge's regiment, and he died on the 22nd of April 1917. He in fact is buried in Walthamstow Cemetery. The second man I would like to mention, out of the 40 on the Xylonite plaque, is Samuel James Hollingsworth. He was born in 1881 in Norfolk. He moved to Highams Park. He married in 1911, and he was a polisher at the Xylonite works. He died aged 37. In fact, he's the oldest man named on the plaques. He was a corporal in the 10th Essex Company, and he died quite early on in the war, on the 27th of April 1914. These two men are just two of the 40 on the World War I plaque here, whom we remember today, ordinary men caught up in extraordinary circumstances.
I've been asked to say something about another memorial that we've discovered. There was a United Reformed Church in Malvern Avenue which closed a few years ago, and there was a memorial there for people from the 1914-1919 war. When the church closed, this was taken to Woodford United Reformed Church, as it is now. It was originally a congregational church. And that again has recently closed due to elderly people and no one able to do the duties there. And so I went to an organ recital there just before the church closed, and I came across this memorial, and they're trying to find a home for it. So I decided that as a Highams Park Society, they're men from Highams Park. We don't actually know much about them. One of our members is an archivist, and she's looking into the history of these men. So one evening I found 3 likely suspects, and we went round to the church and collected it. I was intending to bring it back in my car after the concert, but it's actually 6 foot tall and very, very heavy. So I found some people to help from the committee, and we delivered it to Sandeep's house because he said he was prepared to store it there. Unfortunately, he was on holiday and his parents were in the house looking after the dog and knew nothing about this memorial. So their faces were quite interesting as they opened the door and saw 3 of us standing there in the dark with this huge memorial. Anyway, you may be interested, 3 of the people on the memorial have the same surname as people on the plaques here. If there's a photograph, so if any of you want to look at it later, and if any of you know anyone who may know these people, it'd be very interesting for us. We don't know quite what we're going to do with the plaque. It may come here, but we have to make some inquiries from the council, I believe. So.
Talking of plaques, in 2008, the committee of the Highams Park Society began our quest for the plaques that are now in the library. In Mary Dunhill's book, A History of Hayland and Highams Park, there is a very grainy photograph of a large white Portland stone obelisk. Now that obelisk was the Xylonite and Halex factory's obelisk, and it stood roughly where Magnus is now, very close to that little mini roundabout on the way to Tesco. The Halex works, as the Xylonite works had been named in the 1930s, in fact closed in 1971. Nobody knew where the obelisk had gone, or in fact where the plaques had gone. We tracked them down. And we found the plaques. They were being stored in a barn in Brantham in Suffolk. It was felt that more should be known about such an important monument that was in Highams Park. And the plaques at one point were displayed on another Portland stone obelisk in Brantham, which was the sister factory, in fact, of Halex. That obelisk is still there, but these plaques now have literally come home back to Highams Park. This year, we have been helped, as Margaret said, we've helped bring another war memorial home, this time from Woodford to Highams Park, so not quite as far. As Margaret said, the second memorial we have found was possibly from Malvern Avenue United Reformed Church. There are a number of names, as Margaret said, that are names that are new to us. Historical research never really ends. Steve Jenkins, who is here today, and the 17th Pals Battalion. The 17th Pals Battalion and Steve Jenkins honour men from the Footballers Battalion, and more specifically from Leyton Orient, the Club Leyton Orient, who fell in the Great War. Steve's research is ongoing. In 2018, local resident Alison Baker researched where all of Highams Park's war dead actually lived, and poppy displays were placed in the front windows of their old houses. And now, as I said, the committee of the Highams Park Society needs to find a home and also do some research on another memorial. This year though, we have focused on the men on the Xylonite plaques. There are, however, men named on plaques all over Highams Park, men who died in the First World War and also the Second World War. There's a brass plaque in Malvern Avenue Church. There is a stone plaque outside Winchester Road Methodist Church on Wickham Road. There's a small wooden plaque at the back of Highams Park Baptist Church, and there is a large wooden board with many names on it at the back of All Saints Church. However, local history is a very good starting point. Rupert Brooke talked about English men blessed by rivers and washed by sons of home. World War I was a complex war, however, between countries and also between empires. We are also called to remember those countrymen of the men on the Xylonite plaques who died, who fell in the First World War and also the Second World War. We're also called today to mark men from the Commonwealth, the Million Indians, for instance, who made up the volunteer army of the British Indian Army, the men of the East African Transport Corps, and countless others. Today, we stand here in Highams Library, and we can truly say, their name liveth forevermore.
The Chances by Wilfred Owen. I mind as how the night afore that show, us five got talking. We was in the know. Over the top tomorrow, boys. We're for it. First wave we are. First ruddy wave. That's tore it. Oh, well, says Jimmy, and he's seen some scrapping. There ain't no more nor 5 things as can happen. You get knocked out, else wounded, bad or cushy, scuppered or nowt, except you're feeling mushy. One of us got the knockout, blown to chops. T'other was hurt like, losing both his props. And one, to use the word of hypocrites, had the misfortune to be took by Fritz. Now me, I wasn't scratched, praise God Almighty, though next time, please, I'll thank him for a blighty. But poor young Jim, he's living and he's not. He reckoned he'd 5 chances, and he had. He's wounded, killed, and prisoner, all the lot, the bloody lot, all rolled in one. Jim's mad.
These are the names on the Halex War Memorial plaques here in the library. In proud and grateful memory of the gallant men who left this place to fight in the cause of liberty and justice, and who laid down their lives in the Great War, 1914 to 1918. C. Ames, A. Andrews, W. Baird, T. W. Brooke, A. J. Brooks, J. Elbert, J. Castle, H. Cox, G. Dafflon, P. Digby, H. Dinsdale, T. C. Edwards, T. Elms, E. Frost, S. J. Giblin, G. Glynn, W. Goodman, A. J. Hastler, S. J. Hollingsworth, F. C. Howes, E. Highland, C. Keogh, A. Lewis, C. V. Lockwood, W. Martin, C. Murrell, A. Neville, A. Newland, L. North, A. Nother, T. Oakley, G. J. N. Polly, E. Richardson, J. H. Rumble, H. Searle, H. Shaw, A. Slater, G. F. Smith, H. Smith, T. Sorrell, G. E. Stoddart, W. Stowe, W. Tanter, F. Ward, and in proud and grateful memory of their comrades who died for the same cause during the years 1939 to 45, M. M. Carter, F. Dallas, C. Lewis, F. P. A. Simmons, W. Smith, E. A. Sorrell, A. West. Their name liveth forevermore.
They shall grow not old, and we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrows, we gave our today. I'd like to say how important this ceremony is to the Highams Park Society and also to wider Highams Park. We really do appreciate people coming either for the first time this year or every year. It's incredible that these plaques were somewhere else stored away for many years, and it's so important they are here in an easily accessible place in Highams Park, so we every year can honour the names of the men on the plaques. Thank you very much.